Nobby, welcome to the show. Lovely to have you on, Nobby, and thanks for making some time for us this morning, mate.
Yeah, good morning, Michael. How are you?
Good, mate. Listen, Lindsay McKenzie, he was an observer at your council, in the Invercargill City Council, before you were mayor. How did that work?
Well, he was one of two.
Yeah.
So Lindsay's an interesting character. Got a long history of working at the chief executive level in local governments, Environment Southland, Tasman and the Nelson region, Gisborne, before he came to us. So that was quite helpful in some ways because he's very knowledgeable on how the system works and when it breaks down, how it needs to be repaired. So that was quite a helpful sort of thing to have.
Did he give advice, Nobby?
Yes, he did. He became quite involved. He was, in some ways, a little bit like a mediator that sat on council that could work around the traditional structure. So a traditional structure would be that, and Wellington will be no different than Invercargill, the mayor is the chair of the board, as it were, and she or he will have committees that they run, which are not decision-making in their own rights. They only provide recommendations to full council, but they had chairs as well. So often the mayor and the chairs are quite powerful group within their own right. And if that gets fractured or is not working well, and that seems to be the case in Wellington, then having a different set of eyes that comes in that will do two or three things. It'll help the mayor work their way through what Wellington's currently facing, which is pretty straightforward, but it's very complicated. But it'll also give some independent advice back to the minister, probably through internal affairs, which again, then the minister's not getting it from different parties.
It seems, if I could make an analogy, it seems like a school inspector coming in, and you remember the old days you would, and the school inspector would sit at the back and the teacher would be there, and suddenly everybody was on their best behaviour and the teacher sort of had to lift a standard. Is that the role that they sort of play, that everybody, they've just walked into the room, we better play a professional game? Yep,
well they sit in on all meetings, including some that are not necessarily public meetings, so internal meetings as well. They definitely are a go-between the different people in the structures, but they do that reporting right, and it does change the nature of the behaviour of the players involved because they know that, well, in our case, it would go back to internal affairs because the minister didn't appoint ours, we appointed them as an outcome of a report that we had done, but they're still observers. And I guess if things weren't improved in Wellington, then you would expect the minister would go beyond just having an observer there. He would probably look to things like commissioners.
It was really interesting. We had one in my DHB board. We got one appointed as well because we had internal issues. And everybody sort of assumes that the baddie councillors, which would have been, people like you, Nobby, who are a bit too sort of mouthy, were the people who would sort of be the folk who would be the object of the attention. But in actual fact, it's almost exactly the reverse. They tend to make sure that councillors are given a bit more power, don't they?
Yep, they do. And they'll often go around and behind the scenes talk to the ones that might sit relatively quietly. I mean, I'm quite outspoken, as I'm sure you will have been in the past. But they're not the people that do the damage. The people that do the damage are those that sit there silently and then vote a way that's unpredictable. That doesn't help. So we were lucky in some ways that we didn't have any political work going on in our council. We had two factions, quite entrenched factions, unlike Wellington that's got, I guess, a green component to it. I know they've got Labor Party councillors that are backed by the Labor Party, so that creates some friction internally within local government, I suspect.
The other thing is, I'm interested in the role of an observer in terms of staff. Now, you had problems not just with your mayor, but with your chief executive as well, and with their relationship with you, and with some other councillors too. Do they play a role with the chief executive too?
Yeah, they do. Well, in our case, they did. No secret that I had some conflict with the previous chief executive, who's now left, or didn't get reappointed. And they are, because Lindsay's been in that chief executive role. He's known within the chief executive group as being somebody as a safe set of hands and can come and challenge it without it being across that governance operational divide, which some chief executives make it difficult to work across that divide, which is us working across the operational area and vice versa. So, but I think the big issues, if I look at the landscape in Wellington, 2 or 3 things, I guess. One, they've got a long-term plan that they can't afford now. And so if they can't afford it, do they revisit the long-term plan and cut it back? That's one option. Do they go to the unspoken area that nobody ever wants to talk about, which is personnel costs? Do they look to cut down if they're not prepared to deliver to a certain level, does that mean that you start looking to reduce staffing, which is what the government's done recently? That's a very, very sensitive topic, but it's something an observer can promote without it becoming too politicised. Do rates then have to go up, or do they sell other assets? I mean, if you look at Wellington and what it's facing on lots of levels, roading, tunnels, wastewater, freshwater, I mean, all councils have got that now.
Would you like to be the mayor of Wellington? I mean, it's a shocker, isn't it?
No. I don't think it, and it's nothing to do with the people that are currently there. I just think the politics involved are too wide. When you've got, and I've only just been reading the media stuff, so you don't take everything as being gospel on that, but when you see that 3 Labor-backed councillors pull away from selling the airport and it tips it over, or the airport shares, and it tips it over, it's really hard to deal with those people knowing that there's somebody else behind them pulling the philosophical strings, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the
difference. It's really hard to get a team together.
It is, and that's the big difference. I mean, when I think of Dunedin, Christchurch, Auckland and Wellington, and the difference between councils like you and, say, many other provincial councils is you've got people there with a party label on, with very strong party or political alignment to a particular set of ideologies. It makes it difficult, doesn't it, for common sense to predominate, because they'll take the ideological view.
Yep, it really does. You imagine if you had a council sitting in one of the rural areas, you operate in that area, that was totally dominated by Labour Party or Maori Party local body officials, and with the current government, it would just be unworkable. It puts you at conflict with the people that you're meant to be representing, which is your ratepayers.
We don't tend to see too many views from the media about Invercargill City Council and Nobby Clark at the moment. I'm assuming things are working pretty well then.
No, I wouldn't say that. There's always tension in your council, as you know.
Yep.
And I'm often can be a bit of a lone voice at sometimes. But that's okay. We've got a level of respect for each other. I've got past my 2 codes of conduct, which were complicated.
It just made me laugh, Nobby. I'm sure it wasn't very laughable for you, but what a bloody waste of time.
It was a waste of time, a waste of money. It could have been resolved within half an hour sitting in my office. It was really painful for myself and my partner. She took it quite personal. The public flogging I got from some of my colleagues was not good. But hey, at the end of the day, I'm not going away. I've given a commitment to the ratepayers. And so I'll hang in there till the end of the term, and we'll just see how that goes.